Well, welcome everyone to the December 2025 episode of the FR Panorama series. I'm Larry Liberti, and together with my colleague Mario Alanis, we'll be your hosts for today's webinar as we look into the concept of how do altruistic regulatory pathways expedite and optimize the availability of important new medicines. As usual, we have a lot to share and to discuss, so we'll keep our introductions short. FR Panorama is an educational program of the AirUD Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit, presented in collaboration with the University of Southern California DK Kim International Center for Regulatory Science, which together bring you the FR Path project. And in particular, we're most grateful for the support provided by MSD for the FR Panorama series. So, what are altruistic pathways? Well, for today's session, we're considering altruistic regulatory pathways as a unique group of pathways that have been designed to assess medicines so that their availability can be facilitated, especially in those countries that may not have the capacity or the capabilities to evaluate the products independently. So the results of altruistic assessments can therefore expedite medicines availability while supporting knowledge growth, regulatory system strengthening, and international collaboration. So altruistic pathways, such as the M4All, the marketing authorization for global health products, and the WHO collaborative registration procedure, I think have reshaped global health policy by enabling faster and more equitable access to medicines. Their value lies not only in their technical efficiency, but in the policy impact of fostering reliance and reducing duplication and strengthening trust among regulators. So these pathways demonstrate how collaborative frameworks can shift policies towards harmonization, transparency, and shared responsibilities. And by prioritizing public health outcomes, they encourage capacity building and set precedents for sustainable, globally aligned regulatory practices that advance equity and access worldwide. So, thank you for joining us today as we explore the use and value of these important registration pathways. Today, our expert panel will bring us up to date on the evolution of these pathways. They'll share real-world experiences and offer insights into how stakeholders are addressing the use of these pathways in an increasingly complex regulatory environment. So enjoy your tea or coffee, settle in, and get ready for a dynamic discussion. So let's begin.
Thank you, Larry. Thank you for introducing this highly important and timely topic. Indeed, to better understand altruistic pathways, we have three great speakers that we will present from different perspectives. We're going to start to set the stage with Dr. MAGHP Lumpkin, who will explain how these specialized pathways contribute to regulatory strengthening and medicine availability. Then we will be joined by Dr. Mariana Santos, who will describe World Health Organization specialized pathways, giving an update on collaborative registration procedures. And finally, we will have a real-world experience shared with us about using altruistic pathways from Dr. David Oyambo, who will discuss the benefits of participating in altruistic pathways. Remember, if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat, and then we'll try to address them during the panel session. Now, to formally start, I am honored and I am excited and very happy to welcome our friend and colleague, who is well known to many of you, Dr. MAGHP Lumpkin. He is Deputy Director of Integrated Development at the Gates Foundation, leading global regulatory systems initiatives at the Gates Foundation. And he's globally recognized expert, and he shares the enthusiasm that we have for regulatory systems strengthening and efficiency and particularly reliance. As I had mentioned today, Mac will share with us insights as he introduces us to how these specialized pathways contribute to regulatory strengthening and medicine availability. Mac, over to you.
Thank you, Mario, and thank you, Larry, and good day to all of you who have chosen to join us today on this discussion. I really appreciate the opportunity of being here. And what Mario and Larry asked me to do is to share with you kind of our experiences at the Gates Foundation in both working with product developers for innovative products that are targeted for primarily for use in low-income countries, and also working with the various regulatory systems through which they have to go in order to be legally procured and used in those countries. And hopefully what you'll see by the end of my discussion is why we generally tend to recommend to product development partners who are looking to develop innovative products for low-income countries, that they think very strongly about these altruistic, reliance-based pathways. And in order to kind of tell the story of why we make that recommendation, I wanted to first go back and talk a little bit about some of the challenges that we have seen in this world of reliance, and really ask the question at the beginning, is reliance in regulatory pathways still a theory, or is it becoming a reality, or is it something that's still on a journey? And I think we'll all probably agree that it is something still on a journey. And from our perspective, which might be different from some of you who work primarily focused on regulatory agencies in high-income countries, what we tend to find in resource-challenged environments, that for the NRAs there, it's not so much a question of why do reliance. I think everybody's pretty much bought into the idea, theoretically, that this is and this should be a 21st century best regulatory practice. The question is really more on the how of reliance. And that's where people tend to get hung up. And that's where we tend to see some of the challenges. In working with different countries and different parts of the world, I think one of the things we found is that some countries use these reliance-based pathways very well. They're used to them. They have them built into their systems. They're part of their regular basic way that they do business. But for other countries, it's still very much a challenge. It's something they really don't know how to get their hands around. And when you're thinking about this from a product regulatory strategy perspective, you kind of have to know which of those two categories the country that you're interested in launching your product falls into. And that's why I think sometimes when we look at these different pathways, we will often get median times for products that use a certain pathway. And personally, I find those median times helpful in getting kind of a general idea of how well the pathway is working. But you really, again, need to know for regulatory strategy planning, what does your specific NRA of interest have as their performance metric when it comes to these? What we tend to find is that the problem with these pathways is not so much the pathways themselves. They have been developed over many years. They have been updated over years, that the real challenge often seems to be what we call the last hurdle. And that is actually getting the national authorization at the local NRA level that you need in order to have what you need legally to market your product and to procure your product in that particular jurisdiction. So I wanted to talk with you a little bit about some of the challenges at the national level. One of the big challenges that we see is often in these countries that we focus on, the documents that they get from their reference agency are often not all of that helpful in trying to support a reliance-based national decision because they are far too redacted, especially when you're looking at GMP certificates or you're looking at CMC assessment reports. And the problem with the redaction is obviously one that we all know. It goes to issues of confidentiality laws, what can and cannot be shared between regulatory agencies, and that varies around the world, and it varies with different reference agencies. And so again, part of the planning for a product, if you are going to use a reliance-based pathway, is trying to think who your reference agency is going to be and how well will that agency be able to perform as a helpful reference agency. One of the things we are beginning to see are where people are thinking about giving the assessment report or giving the inspection report to the industry sponsor from the reference agency, and then letting the industry give it to the agency that wishes to use a reliance pathway. While this might get around some of the confidentiality concerns, I think one of the things that we are beginning to see on this particular pathway is that countries are wondering, how do they know that the industry has not altered the document in some way? Whereas when they get it directly from their trusted reference agency, they have much higher confidence in the validity of the document and that it is a document that they can use if indeed it is not over-redacted. A second problem that we run into is that they often don't get the documents in a timely manner. And I think we have to ask the question is, when we think about these reliance-based pathways, what's in it for the reference agency? There's a lot in it for the agency that is receiving the information, but for the reference agency, when it comes to the time and the effort and the expense of performing as a reference agency, it often is not their primary job, and often they are not funded or staffed to do this. And so getting documents in a timely manner is often a challenge, and particularly when you don't have a strong relationship between the reference agency and the reliance agency. And there are also kind of ongoing questions. Is this just a one-off relationship, or what happens, or what is the expectation throughout the subsequent life cycle of this product? Is the reference agency going to be expected to perform in a certain way as far as ongoing updates and ongoing information sharing regarding this product and the life cycle of the product? A third thing that we run into are questions about, are the documents even still relevant, or has too much time elapsed between when the assessments were done by the reference agency and when the application actually goes in to the reliant agency? And has the product progressed? Have there been further changes? Have there been further updates? So there are these questions of being reliance relevant. And this relevance happens in two ways. It's one that I'm talking about now, which is the relevance of the document in terms of where the product is in its current life cycle state. And there is a huge one here, which is the last dot, which we see often in our NRAs with whom we work. And that is the version of the product that is going to be sent to the NRA, the reliant NRA, the same version that was actually assessed by the reference NRA. Now, one would think that Well, of course it is. But in reality, in the parts of the world that we focus on, more times than not, it is a different version. It is a version of the product made maybe by the same company, but in a different manufacturing plant using different providers of API, using different manufacturing procedures. And often it is a version of the product that clearly has never been assessed by the reference agency. So using an inspection report from a reference agency for a manufacturing process in a manufacturing plant that has no relevance to the version that you're receiving obviously makes reliance quite impossible. And being able to determine whether you're getting the same version or not is often quite difficult for our NRAs because the reference agency doesn't know which version you're getting. You have to get information from the manufacturer as to which version you're getting, and then have to be able to look back and compare it on various product characteristics with the version that your reference agency saw. So these are like major things that our NRAs have to think about, even to begin to say, I have the right version, and I have relevant documentation, and I have helpful documentation. So now, yes, I can indeed do reliance. Then you get to, within the program itself, when you get to that point, how do you do the reliance? That's the question that comes up. Many times we're seeing there are legal impediments that countries don't have laws that allow them to do reliance. There are questions about what is your reference agency, which agencies can be your reference agencies. Oftentimes, unfortunately, we see politics coming into answering that question rather than the true capabilities of the reference agent. And it's why we support very strongly what WHO is doing in their assessments of NRAs using the agreed global benchmarking tool and the various maturity levels leading up to the idea of someone being a WHO listed agency, which you'll hear more about in Mariana's talk. But just to say that in general, our understanding and what we support with the WHO is the idea that a WLA is the reference agency standard that countries should be using. There is a little bit, and we're learning more and more as more countries are coming on as WLAs. There are certain countries that are, for lack of a better term, full WLAs, meaning that they are WLA for medicines, they are WLA for vaccines, and they're WLA in all of the various modules in the global benchmarking tool. There are others who are WLA just for medicines, just for vaccines, and some who are just for certain modules, but not for all of the modules. And in many respects, for us, we tend to consider those partial WLAs. There are also the questions of, can an agency be a reference agency for an innovator product and a generic, or are there agencies that perfectly capable of dealing with and being a reference agency for a generic version of a product, but do not have the capabilities to be a reference agency for an innovator product? We often see sometimes that in these agencies, once they get an application and they use an expedited pathway, they have no expedited queue. They just have one queue, and it doesn't matter what, you go to the end of the queue. And when you go to the end of the queue, even if you've come through an expedited pathway, the idea of being expedited dies at that point. And finally, what we find is that often agencies don't have transparency in what their KPIs are, what their performance metrics are when it comes to using these pathways. And so this is my last slide. It's why, because of these challenges that we see, that particularly when product developers are looking and developing innovative products for low-income countries, that we really recommend that they think about these altruistic reliance pathways, whether it's the EU M4All process, whether it's the Swissmedic, MAGHP, and I know other true full WLAs are developing their own programs that are similar to what we all have experienced with the EU and Swissmedic, or using what you'll hear about in the next talk, the WHO's CRP, both their PQ-CRP program and their SRA, or what will soon be known as the WLA CRP program that you'll hear more about. And the reason we encourage these is because clearly these are recognized reference agencies. They have the WHO imprimatur as recognized agencies, but more importantly, built into these programs, this is not a sequential kind of program. They have procedures for engaging the low-income country NRAs in the assessment process, so that within the low-income country NRAs, there is a very real reality of ownership in the decision-making and a greater understanding of how the decisions were made. So it makes it much easier when they then take it home and want to translate the reference agency recommendation and decision into a local decision, because they were part of what happened in the reliance process. They also, because of the timing, they know they have access to the same dossier. They know they have access to unredacted documentation because they were there at the table. They saw exactly the same dossier that the reference agency were seeing. And these are much more formalized processes. They have built into them the idea of transparency and performance and moving to a national authorization very quickly after having gone through the assessment either at WHO or at EMA or Swissmedic, or where the altruistic reliance pathway is. So I hope this gives you some idea of some of the very real challenges we see, but a lot of the hope we see that indeed many of these challenges are being worked through. Countries, as I say, are bought into the why of it. It's more a matter of the how and how to make it work within their system and their capabilities and their laws. And these altruistic reliance pathways are ones that seem to tick many of those boxes. They have WHO involvement. They get a WHO imprimatur by being part of this. And I will finish by again saying we recommend this to product developers. They have a scientific advice component to them. You can be part of the life cycle of the product along with your reference agency. And it's one that I hope those of you who are developing products will also take into consideration. Thank you, and I hope this has been helpful.
Thank you, Mac. It's been more than helpful. You brought up some very interesting points that during our conversation at the end, I'd like to revisit, especially with regard to kind of this concept of what's in it for the reference agency, which is a point of view that I have to say I haven't given a lot of thought about, but like to follow on with that as we move along. Thanks again. Well, remember, if you have, excuse me, any questions, please post them at any time in the chat, and we'll keep an eye on that. So now let's take a look at this topic from a different point of view, from an important contributor to altruistic pathways, the WHO, the World Health Organization. The WHO has been instrumental in using its centralized functions to refine its altruistic pathways. And among the best known and used is the Collaborative Registration Procedure, the CRP. I'm very pleased to introduce you to our colleague, Dr. Mariana Roldao Santos. Mariana is the technical officer with the Special Access Program within the Regulation and Safety Unit at the WHO headquarters. With her deep understanding of this topic, we look to Mariana to share with us her insights around the concept of specialized pathways and give us a bit of an update on the CRP. So thank you very much, Mariana. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Larry, for the introduction. I'm just waiting to see if my slides can be displayed. So welcome, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on your time zone. My name is Mariana Roldão Santos, and I'm working in this team called Special Access Programs at the Regulation and Safety Unit in WHO headquarters. So in the team, I'm mainly responsible for what is called the collaborative registration procedure for products approved by stringent regulatory authorities. But I also we work in the team with other programs such as the EU Medicines for All, supporting the EU Medicines for All, the Swiss Medic Marketing Authorization and Global Health Products procedure, as well as several regional joint assessments, including in Africa and ASEAN. So before I start, I just would like to emphasize that as our main mission in our team, we support member states to implement these called facilitated regulatory pathways, which includes reliance and collaboration mechanisms to accelerate the access to quality assured products globally. This is our main mission in the team. And before I move on with the collaborative registration procedure, I just would like to emphasize what we define and what we see as facilitated regulatory pathways. As everything else, then it fits into this category. So the facilitated regulatory pathways are these pathways available to all countries that facilitate and accelerate the regulatory decisions and the introduction of quality assured products by the countries through the use of these concepts of reliance and collaboration. They come up as a solution to many regulatory authorities, to many countries, because when they are well implemented, it allows the authorities to leverage the work performed by others, improving the efficiency of their regulatory work, of their regulatory systems. It allows the authorities to optimize their human and financial resources, increasing also some expertise in building capacities. They also allow the authorities to reduce the time needed to process a product application and to register a product, which is particularly important for authorities with high workload and low resources. And finally, just to emphasize that while allowing all of this, they also allow the authority to keep always their national sovereignty, so their national independence when it comes to the final decision on the approval of the product. So while these facilitated regulatory pathways help an authority to overcome some challenge that were even mentioned by the previous speaker, my colleague MAGHP, they still always ensure that the authority have the final decision and the final say on what they are approving to be introduced in their countries. So ultimately, they ensure a timely access to priority quality assured products to the population. And now, how does our work in WHO support this pathway and support countries to implement these pathways, these facilitated pathways? So we work in our team in three main areas to support countries. One of them is to support individually the countries or in regional, for example, regional systems such as the regional assessments, systems such as the REC in Africa or the ASEAN Joint Assessment, or others such as the Caribbean regulatory system that is also a joint assessment procedure. So we can help countries individually or at the regional level implementing these pathways, revising their guidelines, implementing these pathways in their guidelines, in their SOPs, so these pathways are properly implemented. And we also provide trainings and online courses on how to conduct an accelerated assessment of marketing authorization for products. Another area where we support countries is through the coordination of decentralized mechanisms such as the CRP, the Collaborative Registration Procedure. And here we have four main procedures at the moment. So we have the Collaborative Registration Procedure for products approved by pre-qualified by WHO, and then for products approved by SRAs. Within the PQCRP, we cover 3 types of products, medicines, for medicines and vaccines, plus vector control, which is new, and in vitro diagnostics. For the SRA-CRP, for the cooperative registration procedure for products approved by SRAs, it can cover any type of product going from innovative to generics, but we will go into that. We also support countries when it comes to emergencies, so situations of public health emergencies or specific programs. And the third area of our support is through these collaborative or work-sharing arrangements. For instance, the regional joint assessments, as I mentioned, so we are currently supporting the ASEAN joint assessment and also African REC joint assessments. We also support programs such as the EU Medicines for All and the Swiss Medic Marketing Authorization Global Health Program. And we support other reliance projects and pilots, such as currently we have a number on the post-approval changes, reliance on post-approval changes. So we know this is also an area where many developers, pharmaceutical developers, struggle, which is with the number of variations or post-approval changes in general. So we are also working on a number of pilots with other authorities, such as EMA, to streamline and to apply, so to support the implementation of reliance on the post-approval changes for products. So this is a big picture of our work. Now I would like to focus a bit more on the CRP. So the collaborative registration procedure, also called the CRP, fits as within one of these facilitated regulatory pathways that I spoke just in the beginning. So the CRP is this mechanism, these reliance or collaboration mechanisms that facilitates the exchange of information to accelerate the national registrations through the provision of unredacted assessment reports and inspection reports to the countries. These reports, they are unredacted, as I mentioned, and they are originated either by stringent regulatory authorities or from the WHO pre-qualification. As my colleague Mac mentioned, this is indeed one of the challenge for NRAs to apply properly reliance, which is for them to feel confident that they can apply reliance. So one of the important items is the access to these unredacted assessment reports.
I think we've had a little disconnect with our colleague in Geneva. So, Zach, why don't we do this? Why don't we go ahead and have David do his presentation, and then if Mariana is able to come back, we can go ahead and connect with Mariana.
Perfect. Okay.
So,
Let
Mario, why
me
don't you do a little introduction?
Certainly, I will. Thank you very much, Larry. I'm sure soon we will be ready to continue with Mariana. Now, as we have mentioned, it is very important to learn and more about the benefits of altruistic pathways and the benefits for regulators, the benefits for industry and for population in general. To share with us the perspective of the benefits, we are pleased to be joined by Dr. David Odhiambo, who is Executive Director of the African Pharmaceutical Network. Today, David will share with us the experience of his organization's members in using altruistic pathways. These are important aspects for optimizing availability of medicines, particularly in Africa, and we look forward to hear his insights today as he discusses the benefits of participating in the use of altruistic pathways. Please, David, you're welcome. Go ahead.
Thank you so much, Mario. Thank you, everyone. I hope you can hear me well and all is well on your end. Hello. Confirm you can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. So thank you so much for this opportunity. I'll be waiting for my slides so that I can pick up. It's a pleasure to be meeting you all and to be engaging in this conversation. So as already mentioned, I'm serving as the Executive Director, African Pharmaceutical Network. So my slide and my presentation today will be structured in 4 parts. There will be an introduction in terms of what we do as an organization to get to know what we do. But then I'll move it to the core conversation in terms of how do these pathways and regulatory procedures help improve availability of medicines. And especially in this context, I'll be looking at it from a point of where are we in Africa and what are the key gaps and what are the opportunities. So African Pharmaceutical Network is a Pan-African platform that convenes life science industry stakeholders and professionals with a focus on knowledge sharing, policy shaping, and nurturing innovations to ensure that we have reliable access to safe, effective, and quality medicines. And we all know from our background and the context understanding is that generally our health systems and pharmaceutical systems within the continent are not as robust and as developed as they should be, and there's need to ensure that we optimize them to ensure that we get the solution, we get the services where people need them. And that is a critical piece about the work that we're doing. And this is founded on some key critical barriers and gaps that we have in the continent. One, limited local manufacturing capability. Therefore, we still reliant on imports over 70% at the moment. And that is for general medicines. When you look at vaccines, we are 99% importing continent. So there's gaps in that. Segregated and disjointed pharmaceutical ecosystem, and that moves it from the initial formulation science, clinical research capacity, manufacturing across the value chain to the point of care at the bedside. Then there was lack of a single platform, and that was the foundation of us come together, establish a platform, and drive this conversation so that we can guarantee the patients within the continent would be able to have guaranteed and reliable access to safe, effective, and quality health products and technologies. And that is the vision, and that is the work that we are driving. Guided by that, we offer some key services beyond the convening and the engagements that we do in facilitate and support. In terms of workforce development, we have some courses that we offer professional certification, but also offer corporate trainings in addressing and unlocking some key opportunities that could support companies, regulators, and industry stakeholders' opportunity to deliver solutions to the markets where people need them. We offer regulatory support services, business ecosystem support, including market shaping work and engagement with regulators to shape policies. When you look at the conversation that Mark was mentioning, where there's a country where there's no legal framework to support reliance, how do we engage with the regulator? How do we engage with the parliamentary leaders to ensure that we can move towards adoption and incorporation of reliance as a pathway for registration of medicines? Because unless that provision exists, all these fantastic and amazing pathways that do exist that can help our patients get the medicine they need will not be happening. And those are gaps that we look at and we ask ourselves, how do we support that? The journey from 2020, as already is here, we've moved from the conceptualization, convening engagement, and we're building our portfolio and network of stakeholders that we are working with to deliver these interventions. And into the new year, as we are going here, we are keen on engaging with as many of you as possible, but seeing how can we make it a reality that geography and location does not determine whether you have access to health products or not. And that would be a key aspiration. So getting to the context and the gist of our presentation today, one thing that I wanted to establish for those of us who are joining, whether you are novice and new in the regulatory space, whether you are mature in the space and you understand how the dynamics work, it is important to understand how does the regulatory process work? And then beyond that, look at it from a business consideration, because all the medicines that we are dealing with, either they're developed by pharmaceutical companies that are in business or pharmaceutical companies in business in collaboration with philanthropic and I would say development partners who are developing solutions to address global health priorities and needs. But at the same time, the consideration would still play out because we're looking at it from a sustainability standpoint. So what does the regulatory process look like? Number one, we look at it and start from GMP inspection and certification of manufacturing facilities. When the government and the regulatory authority that is mandated to oversee the process of getting products into the country takes action, they have to confirm that you're bringing paracetamol in, let's say, for example, in Kenya, Is it being manufactured in a pharmaceutical plant that has the right structure in terms of quality, safety, and efficacy in terms of the GMP processes? Do we have the right professional? Do we have the right facility design? Do we have the right, I would say, source of ingredients? Where are we getting them? So that we ensure that the manufacturing process will follow the right procedure. So it has to be inspected, it has to be certified. And once you've confirmed the site is permitted to produce, we move to the next level, new drug application, where you now submit your dossier for the product that you intend to introduce into the market. It will be evaluated, reviewed, and ultimately a registration is granted. That can happen either through the reliance pathway that we're talking about, even the GMP piece, or through the national routine procedures that take place. After the medicine has been registered at the country, there will always be life cycle maintenance. That is the post-approval changes. How will the post-approval changes happen? You need to make submission whenever you're changing any source of any product, changing the manufacturing facility, increasing the quantities of whatever you're manufacturing. All these has to be reviewed. And at the point when you're bringing a product into the country, it has to be permitted, and that is where the import-export permit processing requirements come into the regulatory process. All these take place before any medicine can be in any patient's access, and therefore then the question is, how do we ensure they happen in a seamless, time efficient, and actually cost-effective way to guarantee that patients don't have to wait forever to get their medicines, but at the same time, the regulatory process does not waste resources in ensuring that the ecosystem works efficiently and seamlessly. From a company standpoint, this is guided with some of my experiences in the industry from work, and the key thing is we have registration pathways and timelines, which is a key pain point. If I want to register a product in a country and it's going to take me 48 months, 36 months, or more than that, there's already a problem. I would want to have it registered as fast as possible, because then the faster it is available in the market, the faster that I can actually get the patients to use it. But from a business timeline, you're asking yourself, how long do you get to start making money out of the product that you're selling at one point or the other? They look at the market size, the number of patients, and the commercial value of it. If I want to register a product, I would give a case for the example in the African region. If it is a product, let's say anti-malarial, in Kenya, we're talking about 2.5 million cases of malaria on a year. So then, is that market substantial enough? But if I can access more countries, then that is easier for me. And therefore, then you make a decision to get into that market or not get into the market. So what is the market size? What is the probable demand for the product that you're bringing into that place and that market? Then the cost of regulatory procedure. And the cost is not only from a point of how much is the regulatory fees. The cost comes from the cost in terms of fees, the amount of money that I need to spend to recruit technical experts to write the dossier, review the dossier, make any amendments, coordinate the submission and registration process. So all these are considerations that companies will need to make. And when that is happening, the question is, which pathway gives us the best value, and how do we ensure that that value can be harnessed to ensure that the patients get the medicine they need? Because at the end of the day, the patient looks at the medicine being available for them. So when we have alternative regulatory pathways, we need to ask ourselves, what is the value and how does it come into place? As African Pharmaceutical Network, we looked into the conversation and noted that actually from our own experiences, we had used some of these pathways, but from an industry level, there was a gap. And the gap was in terms of, one, understanding of what the regulatory, knowledge about the regulatory pathways, and two, understanding on how they would work and what mechanism needed to be adopted to ensure that industry stakeholders could adopt them. On the other end, from a regulator standpoint, regulators, some had the idea of what these pathways are, how they could be used, but the operational nuances around it. So if the regulator doesn't know the pathway, they will not adopt it and will not use it. If the industry doesn't apply through the pathway, there's no way the regulator, whether interested or not interested, will be able to use the pathway. So when we started off, the key conversation for us was, let us start from a point of establishing these pathways in terms of creating awareness about the pathways, having conversation with people and socializing them so that people can know more about them, how they are used and how they're adopted. And most importantly, beyond the conversation is, how do we help you adopt them when you needed to get to use them in that ecosystem? So those are key ones. So these are some of the regulatory pathways, and we'll talk about them there. Some have been mentioned, some will be talked about. So we have WHO collaborative registration procedure. Mariana was talking about this. We have the Swissmedic Marketing Authorization for Global Health Products, European Medicines Agency, the EUM for All, Medicines for All initiative. We have regional economic communities, especially within the African context. We've had the conversation around African medicines regulatory harmonization from 2009. 2012, the first regional economic community, the East African one, was operationalized and established. We've moved towards, in terms of the adoption, use, and registration of product through the joint assessment procedures. Can we socialize them enough so that more people know them and are using them to ensure that medicines get to the people earlier and faster, but also incentivize industry to use them and actually get more products in the market where people need them? And the last piece is general regulatory reliance, which can be all of them, but also can be depending on now where we talk about the WHO ML for reference authorities and related, what are the frameworks? So when we look at all these are the different pathways that we look at, and there are more that I know definitely are there. And the question that was asked is, what are the benefits of these alternative regulatory pathways? And they looked at it from a benefit for the patient and a benefit to the regulators, but also a benefit in terms of the entire ecosystem that we're operating in. Number one, when we use this pathway, we have an expedited market access for innovative products. Looking at the consideration that companies do make when they're planning on introducing a product into the market, the question is, which market do I want to take my product first that can help me, first of all, harness the economic value of that product, but also sustain our operation so that we don't close shop before introducing into alternative markets. And therefore, stronger economies will always come in as priority countries for launch of new products. On that account, the question is, when it's getting in, for example, to the US, when it's getting into Germany or wherever it is in some of the developed economies, what happens to a patient in Kenya, in Uganda, in Malawi that might not be able to get that medicine? That is a missed opportunity to get them a solution. These alternative pathways then expedite the pathway to get the product there, because if the regulator at the country level is collaborating with Swissmedic, for example, in the registration and review of the product, upon passing and actually confirmation that it has been registered by Swissmedic, then it is expected to be registered in this other country within 6 months based on the pathways and the procedure as it is. That is reducing the timeline rather than waiting until it's been sustainable in another market to introduce it. It is going in parallel registration with slight extension of 3-6 months. And I'd give an example here. There's a product that has actually been registered by Novartis, that is the Coartem baby for children less than 5 kgs. This was taken through the Swissmedic pathway. And in that process, it has been registered in Ghana, it has been registered in Kenya, it has been registered in Uganda, and other countries are actually in the process of finalizing the registration. And therefore, then you can see out of that per single product that might not have gotten into this market, there is value that is being made by the virtue that it's coming earlier than it would have when you look at the conventional normal procedure and timelines for new product introduction in our respective markets. Timelines for review. Now, conventionally in our market is 24 to 36 months. In these collaborative processes and through reliance, we're saying if it has been approved by a country and you submit all the requisite documents at the national level, most regulators in the continent have committed to say within 6 to 9 months, you will get it registered. So that is already reducing the timeline by adopting these alternative pathways. For the regulatory authorities, we look at it having nascent regulatory agencies. It's opportunity to learn about what are the conversations around, what are the quality consideration, what are the experiences with these medicines. And I would say by the virtue that pharmaceutical companies prioritize some of these countries, this is an opportunity to adopt it and actually make it be a learning moment for the regulators to learn about the products, the different novel therapies, whatever it is that's coming up, as an opportunity to strengthen their own capacity. Because it's not going to be forever that they might be able to rely on another country. How do they get to know? And even in that reliance, can they learn and actually have a robust regulatory system at the country level? In case the innovations that are coming within the local ecosystem, it has to be given the stamp of approval from the country. That will only be dependent on having that internal capacity. And this capacity building is also an opportunity where I could say, when Mark asked the question, how do the reference authorities benefit from such procedures? It is also a capacity building moment when you look at the dossier. We have the CMC section, we have the clinical, preclinical, and all that. Different diseases, because some of them have targeted disease areas. For example, marketing authorization for global health product, the Swissmedic MAGHP, looks at some of the infectious diseases which are predominantly in low and middle income countries and predominantly Africa in this context. by the virtue that we have clinical specialists and infectious disease specialists who are focused and actually expanded duration of their time learning about these diseases. In the review pathway, they're now adding their clinical and context-specific knowledge into that. And it is a collaborative nexus. You never know when the next pandemic or the next disease outbreak might be coming, where there's need for development of new countermeasures, where this regulatory knowledge that is being shared from the emerging markets could be of value in terms of bringing new products to the market. And I think this is a collaborative nexus where the benefits of these pathways is about creating knowledge, sharing knowledge, and facilitating access to health products and technologies where they need them. And the last piece is an expanded market. If I was to register a product in only one country, maybe the market size is too small. But through these regulatory pathways, I'm expanding my scope and saying, now I can access 16 countries through a single submission, then ultimately translate it into a registration in all the other markets through reliance and all that. Shorter timelines, larger patient populations, faster access to the patients who need it, but also commercial viability for the company on the other end. Therefore, we are meeting the public health need, but also driving economic viability for the industry, for the life science industry, and getting to ensure sustainability across the value chain. So those are some of the key things when you look at it in benefits. For us as an organization, as we continue this work, we have our trainings, and I've already mentioned, we have our regulatory affairs course. So this covers mostly trainings around the foundational piece to the last mile in terms of how do regulatory processes and activities work within the continent of Africa, and demonstrating and guiding each other as we learn together. So for those who would be interested for our course, that is the QR code. You can scan it and we'll engage as we move along. And with that, I come to the end of my slide. Feel free to engage. My email is down the screen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. That what I take away from your presentation is that there are quite a number of approaches that can be taken within Africa, for example, and then if we expand that to other regions, what we need to do is take this holistic view that you were talking about, that there are many stakeholders, each one has different rationale for participating in these projects, and they each have benefits that they can derive from this. So we'll touch on this in our little conversation right at the end of our session today. But we're happy to say that the internet is back up and running, and that Mariana, we believe, is back on track. And so we will go ahead and link Mariana back in again, and she'll take a few minutes to finish up where she had left off. And sorry that the internet decided to have a fit, but thank you, Mariana.
Thank you so much. I think we can all see the slides. And first of all, apologies for this technical glitch. But I think actually the rest of the slides will fit perfectly after Mac and David's intervention. So I think it will be a great fit for some final remarks. So I mentioned some of the activities that WHO supports and how WHO supports this type of facilitated regulatory pathways, this type of reliance mechanisms, and being CRP one of them. So I was going now to touch on how CRP works, so everyone has a general idea. So the way how CRP works is the applicant makes a product submission using the same product dossier to multiple CRP participating countries. And from our side, WHO, we provide the assessment reports and GMP inspection reports for those products to the countries, to the focal points that we have in each of the countries. And a country then having access to all of that can then take a more confident, accelerated decision on the registration of the product, ensuring therefore a faster access to priority quality assured products by the population. So this is the concept in a nutshell. Obviously, the steps are a bit more defined, and you will have access to my slides, and all of this is also available online. But just to give you an overview, particularly when it comes to CRP for products approved by stringent regulatory authorities, the way how it works is that an applicant expressed an interest, so a company expressed an interest directly to us. We will give you we will also leave our contacts at the end. We will engage the company if it's the first time we even provide the training. Similarly, we will also engage with the authority, our focal points in each of the authorities where the company wants to make the submission of the product. The company completes the product dossier submission. It's a full CTD product dossier that should be submitted to the countries, together with an expression of interest to use SRA-CRP. And then we receive the reports from the SRA, the GMP inspection reports from the company, the GMP inspection, the SRA in the company, both the GMP inspection reports and the assessment reports. And we also get from the SRA an important document called the Quality Information Summary. So the Quality Information Summary is a document that is validated by the SRA and is shared to us and from us directly to the country. So when MAGHP was mentioning that one of the struggles is indeed the insurance of sameness of the product, this document comes to help on that. So this document helps the country to ensure that what they are receiving, the product dossier submission they are receiving, is for the same product as the product that was assessed and approved by the stringent regulatory authority. And this is the critical moment for a country to apply reliance in a confident manner. So this quiz, this quality information summary, comes actually directly from the SRA through us to the country. So the country can ensure that the information it has been validated by the SRA without going through the company. While the company does the full product dossier submission to the country, and because the company will also have access to this final validated quiz, they can also add it in the module 1 as part of their submission. So after that, we reach out to our focal points, confirming, checking whether they confirm acceptance of using CRP for that product. And after we have this confirmation, we provide all this documentation from our side through our secure platform, and a country will start then their assessment. We foresee 90 working days for a country to complete their product assessment and come up with a final registration of the product. And when we say 90 working days, we refer to 90 working days of regulatory time. Regulatory time, it excludes the applicant's time, so the time that the applicant takes to answer any list of questions. So it's purely assessment time on the NRA, on the regulatory authority side. But the benefits of SRA-CRP do not end here. They can also be applied to post-approval changes maintenance. So any product that was submitted through SRA-CRP, but in the meantime, the SRA already approved some variations or some other post-approval changes, those can be also submitted through SRA-CRP, so the country can still apply reliance to those post-approval changes, and within 30 working days come up with a final regulatory decision on the post-approval change. So when applying SRA-CRP, a country can, a regulatory authority of a country is able to apply reliance to the scientific assessment report and GMP inspection reports, which are unredacted, as I mentioned, to any testing conducted prior registration, but also they are able to apply a reliance on the post-approval changes to these products that were submitted through CRP. So in terms of SRA-CRP, the scope of products, as I mentioned, is wide. So it's any product, any medicine, as far as it has been approved by a stringent regulatory authority. So any medicine that has been approved by a stringent regulatory authority is eligible to be submitted through SRA-CRP. And this is the big potential of this program, is that there are no limitations in terms of therapeutic areas or types of medicines. It can go from any innovative to generic products or chemicals or biologics. In terms of the current participating countries in SRA-CRP, this is the list. We have at the moment 65 countries and one regional economic community, which is the Caribbean. So it means that any company that is interested to make a submission to one of these countries can utilize SRA-CRP if the product has been approved by a stringent regulatory authority. And now coming to the definition of SRA, to the SRA-CRP, that is the basis for SRA-CRP. So an SRA, stringent regulatory authority, has been defined on WHO guidelines. However, the goal is now to move to the WLA context that has been already introduced by MAGHP. So a WHO listed authority, a WLA authority, so it's a WHO listed authority. He's a wider assessment of authorities on their regulatory systems. So this means that when we move from a stringent regulatory authority to WLA, WHO listed authority, CRP, we will have access to a wider scope of authorities, a wider number of authorities that will be eligible to be the reference authorities for CRP. So this is planned for next year. During the next year, we are planning to revise the SRA CRP guideline to move to the WLA CRP guideline. And we will completely change this concept from SRA to WLA more formally through this update and revision of our current guideline. But so the current, just to give you the current list of SRAs, so the current list of SRAs that we are using at the moment, we are speaking of the European Union member states, including the European Medicines Agency, plus US FDA, TGA Australia, Health Canada, Swissmedic from Switzerland, UK, and PMDA Japan. So this is at the moment the list. And when we move to the WLA CRP, we expect that the reference authorities, the number of reference authorities will significantly increase as they are considered the WHO listed authorities. And therefore, we also expect that the number of products that can be submitted through WLA CRP, so through SRA CRP, that will be WLA CRP, will also significantly increase. So this is a major update that we have about SRA CRP for next year. In terms of the current guideline, if you wish to familiarize yourself a little bit more with the guideline, I just leave here the link. There is a guideline that provides all the steps and all the tools available so you can apply SRA CRP more efficiently. And just to give you a very high-level idea on the progress of SRA CRP over the years, so in terms of number of participating authorities, it's significantly increasing, particularly since 22, which is when we started a new strategy also to engage more countries and to give a second life to SRA CRP. The number of authorities is significantly increasing since then. And similarly, also the number of registrations. We can see that over the years, there is more interest from companies and more products being submitted through SRA CRP. In terms of the median time, and our colleague Mac also mentioned that, so we know that it shouldn't be a static metric, let's say it, but it gives us an idea how the program is going. And we can see that, so the median time that a country takes to approve a product when using CRP in 25 was 102 days of regulatory time and applicant time. And I wanted to emphasize this because it makes a difference, we know, but we were not able to split the applicant time of the regulatory time. So the figures we have here is with both. So this means that it's the time that the NRA took for the assessment, but also the time that the company took to reply to the questions. So both of them are merged here. So this is about 102 days for 25, but if we consider that the company took about a month to answer any list of questions, we can see that the countries have been able to approve the product under 90 days in 21, 22, 24, and in 25. We also saw the tendency for countries to take more time to do the assessment when it's an innovative product versus a generic, obviously. But overall, we see that the countries take significantly less time when applying SRA CRP compared to the national procedures. The shortest approval that we had so far for SRA CRP was 5 working days. As I mentioned, we also support the EU Medicines for All and the Swissmedic Marketing Authorization Global Health procedure. We support in different stages of the both process when the product is being revised by EMA, Swissmedic, and the countries, the target countries. But we also support, and particularly after the assessment is concluded, when it's the time for the product to be introduced and registered in the country. So here is where the combination of both EU Medicines for All and Swissmedic Marketing Authorization procedure and SRA CRP combine very well. And this is where I wanted to give you in this slide just an idea how both can be combined. So after an assessment via EU Medicines for All or a marketing authorization global health procedure of Swissmedic, after the assessment of the product has been concluded with a number of countries, let's give an example of 2 countries, the product can be submitted to the country through 2 ways. One is through using the national procedure, so following the national timelines, or via SRA-CRP. And in this case, we can even add additional countries beyond those that participated in the assessment procedure. And when using SRA-CRP, what it applies is the timelines and the standards as per the SRA-CRP guideline. I just wanted to give you very quickly in 1 minute 2 examples of the great impact of these facilitated regulatory pathways, where we combine actually different pathways. For example, EU Medicines for All and SRA-CRP, or the Swissmedic procedure and SRA-CRP. So the first case is lenacapavir. So lenacapavir is this first twice yearly injectable pre-exposure prophylaxis for HIV. So it's quite innovative and quite desired worldwide. There was the assessment conducted via EU Medicines for All, where we participated WHO, but we also supported with the nominations of the countries. The assessment was concluded in the Q3 of this year. And in Q4, so in this last quarter of the year, it was initiated the SRA-CRP for the product to be approved in 11 countries. Out of these 11 countries that the submission started about a month ago, we can say that already 5 countries already approved the product, and you can see it goes from 12 working days to 25 working days for the regulatory approval when using SRA-CRP. So it's a very good example of combination of these 2 tools. And similarly, there is also a very good example with the Swissmedic marketing authorization procedure for global health products. And this is for carbetusin. Carbetusin is a product used for postpartum hemorrhage and very much needed, particularly in countries where it's needed this heat-stable formulation. Considering that still worldwide postpartum hemorrhage is still one of the leading causes for maternal health, this product comes as a very high demand. So the assessment was concluded of using the Swissmedic marketing authorization procedure for global health products, and the SRA-CRP was initiated between 22 and 25. So it was in different groups. It was not one. The company did not do one submission to all countries. Actually, the companies using SRA-CRP, they can use one submission. They do first they group the countries and they do different moments of submissions of the products to different countries, and this can be spaced as the company wish. So in this particular case, the company decided to do a number of submissions throughout the years between 22 and 25. And we can say out of these 13 countries that the company did a submission using SRA-CRP, already 11 approved the product. And the shortest was within 90 working days. At the moment, there are other submissions also going on, but this is also a very good example where both facilitated product introduction tools, so in this case, the Swissmedic procedure and the SRA-CRP work efficiently to help accelerating the registration of priority products in countries. So with this, I finish my presentation. Just would like to inform you that all the resources are available in our website. You can find all this information. And I thank you very much for your patience also with the technical glitch earlier. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariana. Thank you very much. You know, it's interesting, this combination of FRPs that you mentioned. We've seen this actually in statistics looking at the facilitated pathways within the US FDA, that the combination of different kinds of FRPs is additive or sometimes even synergistic. So I very much appreciated seeing your information about combining these approaches. Great examples about lenacapavir and carbocetin. Thanks for those practical approaches there. We have a question that's come in from our audience, and maybe I'll pose it to Mac. First of all, thanks very much for the compliments about the wonderful presentations we've had so far. The question had to do with, and I think you've talked about this, Mariana, is the WLAs that are working on processes similar to MAGHP and to the M4All. How do they get involved? Because Mac brought up a really good point. He said, sometimes we don't think about the impact on the agency itself. We say, yes, we want everybody to participate. And yes, we think this is great to move forward. There's the WLA CRP. But do we have a sense of what, as Max said, what's in it for them and whether or not there's any pushback or impact? And so maybe I'll start with you, Mac, and then Mariana, and then David, if you just want to chime in there.
Yeah. I think our experience, Larry, has been that in certain of the reference agencies, they actually have it built into their legislation, like in the EU. It is clearly part of their mission. And this is something that they do and that they fund and that they see as part of being a good member of the global regulatory ecosystem. And a belief that, if there is a stronger global regulatory ecosystem, everybody is protected better. Because as we all know, these are global commodities, and the scourge of substandard and falsified drugs affects all of us to different degrees. I think then we see situations like Swissmedic, who want to do it, who are willing to do it, have put the effort in, but they, at least our understanding when we work with them, is that their funding is totally fee-driven, and it is for domestic work. And so for them to get involved in this, we fund part of what they do, and the Swiss Development Corporation funds part of what they do. So for some of these, there is a funding issue because it doesn't fall within their legislative remit. Others that we're working with who are trying to develop similar programs, I think it comes again, as I said earlier, from this desire to be part of the global regulatory system, to offer what they can. And often, they find that in working with the regulators from the NRAs, this is not a one-way street. It's a two-way street. They often learn a great deal about what it means to use a product within a different healthcare system. What does it mean to use a product within a population that has a high incidence of malaria or TB or malnutrition or HIV? So it's a two-way learning to try to decide what makes sense and what's the benefit-risk calculus in the setting in which this product's going to be used. And it's not a calculus that someone sitting in Amsterdam obviously knows, because they know the science, they know the technical parts, but they don't know the healthcare system where this is going to be used. And so to have that voice and to have those joint sharings of the overall reality for what this product does, what this product's benefit risk profile is, and then what it means in a certain healthcare system needs both. And there is tremendous learning and enjoyment in being part of that.
That's a really important consideration, is this two-way learning. Mariana, you touched on the list of the WLAs, and I was wondering if you could just reflect for 2 minutes on this.
Thank you. Yes, sure. I think Mac already said I think one of the main reasons why WLAs wish to participate and to conduct this type of procedures. And I think it's because it's part of their mission, and we don't work anymore in silos, we work globally. So we know that a problem in the other side of the globe can affect us very quickly. So I think there is this desire of having these global procedures that have benefit worldwide. So in this particular case, I just wanted to emphasize, so besides the EMA with the EU Medicines for All and the Swissmedic MHGHP procedure, other WLAs, which I think it's the question about other WLAs. So where we saw that there was interest and potential in the future to have similar procedures is in the Asia area. So the ASEAN Joint Assessment, currently they included one new pathway where they can conduct a full assessment with the called stringent regulatory authority, with the reference authority. So any reference authority such as on that region, such as TGA Australia or PMDA Japan, if they are willing to conduct together, so they allow for this as part of the ASEAN Joint Assessment procedure. So this is certainly an area or a part of the globe where we see that some additional similar procedures may come up. But obviously it will depend on the company submissions and on the countries being willing to collaborate.
Great. I'll leave the final word to David because we're running out of time here. But David, what do you think?
I think this is a good place, and I think there's value that is being harnessed by both. And from Mark and Mariana, the key conversation is they are of value to all of us, and we just need to adopt them better. But I think one of the key things beyond the Swissmedic and the EU M4, which are structured within the regulatory schemes from, I would say, mature regulatory agencies, the work WHO is doing is really, really critical, because the foundation of all these procedures is trust. And that is the question that Mark presented initially. How do we build that issue of trust to ensure that we trust the decisions that are being made by the mature regulatory authorities? Number two, we need substantial time frame so that it can be socialized for the industry to use them. I will look at the case, for example, in the Swissmedic MAGHP procedure as it has been. From the formulation to the current moment, we're talking about, I'd say, around 29 or 30 products since then. So the question is, it takes time for them to be socialized. And if we are anxious to get things happening very fast, we might give up before we actually realize the benefit. So the patience needs to be there, but we need to be willing to commit to the end goal of what we aspire for. That is what I would say.
It's a practical way to look at it. We did have a couple more questions. We've kind of run out of time here. The question about sameness, we did a presentation on sameness about a year ago. So I'd suggest maybe you take a look at that webinar. I know that IFPMA has been updating its activities in this area. So I'd suggest to the people who have had a couple more questions to take a look at this recording, and you'll see the contact information for the speakers if you'd like to get in touch with them. So with that, I want to thank you all for this. Just to say that typically what we do is we have a couple of recommendations, and we covered a lot of ground, and there are a couple of things that have sort of popped out with regard to today's activities. And some takeaways, I think, are that product development partners and people who are developing these interesting new products, whether they're generic or all of the classes that were covered, should reach out to groups like the EMA and Swissmedic and try to use those pathways in the first instance. As we heard from Matt, it's a great place to start. We know that the CRP is super important. It's important to engage. So engage with the WHO, engage with the agencies, get them to invite NRAs from different countries to be able to participate. We did have a question that we just don't have time to address, which is, how do you incentivize a WLA to participate if they don't want to, or they tend to be slow? And the last part is, you want to get everyone in the process as early as possible in the drug development process, because the more you know early on, the better it is. So with that, I want to thank you all. Remember, a recording of this session will be archived shortly on the frpath.org website. Remember to check out the other resources at frpath.org, where you can find much more information about reliance and other facilitated pathways. Once more, Mario and I would like to extend a very, very special thank you to our guests, to Mac, to Mariana, and to David for taking their time today, for fighting through the internet challenges and making this just a wonderful experience. So Mario and I thank you for your interest and participation, and all our best until we meet again. Thanks.
Thank you.